Welcome to Behind the Mic, a podcast from the Concrete Foundations Association featuring discussions with some of the leading professionals in today's concrete industry. Here's your host, Jim Beatty.
Well, we continue to be live here at World of Concrete 2020 in Las Vegas. It's day 3 and more activity on the floor. Probably one of the better day 3s that I can remember, having been around World of Concrete since 1992. And I've been able to entice one of the younger generation contractors that's in the midst of what I get a chance to do day in, day out. Tim Ball, TCB Walls Incorporated from Melbourne, Florida. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's an interesting time here, and I wanted to have a chance to sit down and talk with you a little about. I know a lot about your background. You grew up in Ohio. Your dad had a very successful wall business. I had the chance of awarding your company many projects early on in my career with the association. What do you remember the most about concrete and your dad's business from Ohio?
I was always a part of it. Just grew up in it, around it, doing it. So it was foreign to me that people didn't know all about concrete when I talked to other people.
Oh my, yeah.
So it was just a natural transition. I put myself through college. I started a little footing company, doing footers for other poured wall contractors in the Cincinnati market. And when I graduated college, I didn't think I wanted anything to do with concrete. So I was using my business management and finance degree. I went into financial services for a firm down in Florida. Tried that for a couple years. Decided I didn't like having 7 bosses that checked on me all the time. Didn't realize exactly what that industry would be like. There's some differences from what you would think were going on and involved in the ethics, I guess you could say, of how that industry works. And I just saw a huge demand for above grade concrete homes in the Florida market, a huge labor shortage. So in 2004, I quit the financial services industry and moved into doing something that I was very familiar with, being poured walls. So I'm doing a basement above ground.
What year was it that you got into a footing business? What
It was 1998.
1998, you came out of high school.
Yep.
And said to yourself, I'm going to start a footing business for some poured wall guys.
I did. I had my first couple of employees at 18 years old and learned a lot of really tough lessons early on.
Were they friends that graduated high school with you? Or
that was the
guys
first mistake I made, yeah.
Okay.
I started with some friends, and then kind of learned some lessons about friends in business and how to have friends as employees or not have them, and how you have to keep relationships separated a little bit, and learned a lot. I think it was a really good experience for me.
I grew up in a contractor family, and I worked for my dad for many years. He was an electrical contractor, still is, and my brother is his partner right now. And so I get that. I know, when you're in high school particularly, you're that extra labor that they rely on. So you worked for your dad during that time, but did you ever work for your dad professionally?
No, I never did.
Okay.
I also had an uncle that you well know that was in the Cincinnati market as well, doing basements. And so when I had the thought of doing concrete, I certainly didn't want to compete against my father and my uncle. So I had connections in the industry for formwork and trucks and all that kind of thing. And, I had a business management degree, so I wrote a really good business plan, met with bankers, and was able to secure financing for a startup and acquire equipment that way without having to I didn't want to have any partners. I didn't want to have any kind of lead-in where I had ties and other ownership in my company. So I wanted to do it on my own.
Yeah. Was there ever that really scary moment where you thought, man, what have I just done? Or what am I really trying to do here?
I'd say all of 2006, 7, and 8.
What a horrendous time period.
We went from I was pouring 3 house walls a day and had a commercial crew going at the end of 2005. And then it was basically like somebody turned off a switch and it went down to 2 a day and then 1 a day and then a couple a week. In pretty short order, within 6 months, it really dried up. And so we started getting into other things. I started doing a lot of medical, and that was really a big thing for us as we did above grade concrete radiation structures.
Okay.
And, it's still a poured wall. It's just we had walls that were 3 foot and 11 foot thick rather than 6 and 8 inches thick, and might have 10 mats of steel in it. But that was really good industry for a while. All that's changed with the change in Medicare paybacks and all that, so a lot of that started dying off, but it didn't really start dying off until the industry had come back. And we're still doing a lot of medical, but now it's assisted living facilities, small doctors and dentist office, and a lot of that kind of stuff, which is still about 70% of our business.
Okay. Well, at what point do you think that concrete changed from being a vehicle to your needs to more of a craftsmanship? Consider yourself a craftsmanship? I sense from you as I talk with you.
Yeah, we we pride ourselves in doing the hardest and most difficult things that nobody else wants to touch. And so the residential we do is typically, we'll do some smaller houses occasionally. A lot of them for customers that we already work for, we'll do their personal houses. I've built most of the structural engineers in our town's house, and general contractors' personal houses, they always want our product. But I like the fact that we do stuff that nobody else will do or is scared to do, and we can figure out how to do it.
Wow. Yeah. I tell you, just again, from my experience with your family, that sounds an awful lot like those projects that I saw early on that your dad and your uncle were undertaking. Some crazy stuff. What do you think, as you reflect back, what do you think you took most from the business that you grew up seeing in your dad?
Basically, the ethics of it, I think, is the most important lesson I learned. You treat people right and how you would want to be treated, and run your employees and your customers that way. And you might not get every project right away. You have guys that are doing things that aren't that way to get projects from you. But now, after 15 years in business, all my work is repeat work. I haven't made a cold call in 5 years. So everything that I do is basically from referrals from happy, very satisfied customers. And so we were at a function last week for a charity event, my wife and I, and we walk in and there was a president of a bank there. I'd done his house and he's talking to me, and then a doctor walks up and says, "Hey, I didn't know you were going to be here," and I built his building. And then another guy walks up who's a owner of a general contracting firm. I had done his house. And it was neat to see, because then at the end of that, I had another doctor walks up, and I had just bid his new medical complex the week before. And so then I had all these guys telling them how great we were and what a pleasure it was to work with and how great the product is. Because I really do believe, and I think that genuine belief in the product is what helps sell it, because I really do believe it's the best product you could do for the exterior walls of your home.
Well, and so that is absolutely the measure of a craftsman as you talk about your experience right there and the present day success you're having. And so you've introduced us to concrete housing, and that being a big part of your business. I mean, you're still doing a lot of commercial work too. What drove your desire to try to solve the concrete house? Because it's not something that we see typically in the marketplace today. There's an awful lot of wood stud construction and building the way that we have for 150 years. What was your impetus to say, I think that's something I can take on?
It's a giant ship to try to turn, and I'm not by any means trying to change the entire industry, but in my small market of where we are, I get requests to go all over the state that fortunately and unfortunately we're too busy to actually take on a lot of that work. But there's a huge desire to switch from what the last 150 years has been more of a temporary structure. If you look at the rest of the world, they just don't build like this. And it really, if you just logically take a step back and look at it, it doesn't make any sense that we build this way. Why aren't we passing homes down as estates like they do in all of Europe and all the islands and stuff? And they're homes that are 500 years old. I challenge to see a stick-built home that's not in great need of repair and stuff after 50.
Right.
If it's not well maintained, it's 10.
Right, exactly.
So the fact that the cost difference is so small, there's just a lot of different underlying things in our industry here in the U.S. that need to change to take into account a higher quality construction and giving credits for that in appraisals, and just making the resale of that so much more desirable, which it is. But right now, appraisals don't account for the higher quality of construction to the degree that they should. But there's a lot of small things that for a minor increase in the price of the house, you could have a structure that's going to be there for generations.
So you're a shell contractor. You'd consider yourself a shell contractor.
We primarily try to do walls, but we'll do slabs, footings, walls, and then elevated decks a lot.
Okay. Most of the roofs on the homes that you're building, the walls that you're doing, what do they end up being in your market there in Florida?
So we're seeing a bigger increase in the metal trusses, which I think is a really good step in the right direction. But even if it's wood, the majority of the homes and stuff we do are using a spray foam insulation underneath, and they're doing an air-conditioned attic space, not letting that hot air in and all the moisture and stuff that causes all the rot, mold, mildew, all that into the envelope of the building. And so by eliminating that, I feel like it's a much better structure. And then the actual roof deck is a lot of metal, clay tile, that kind of stuff.
Are you working for the same builder? Is there a comfort level that you've achieved with one particular or a set of builders there in your market?
I actually have customers now that I've had for 15 years. We celebrate our 15th anniversary in November, and I have a couple guys that are at 14 and 15 years that we've continued to work for. I've tried to back away from guys that weren't the greatest customer for whatever, either they had difficult customers that I had to work for, or their payment terms weren't quite as favorable and for me, but their demand is there enough that I've been trying to just work with really high quality contractors. And I've got commercial contractors now that we've had for 13 and 14 years that we're still working with. I've had a number of them retire that have aged out at this point, and we continue to selectively add on a few new ones.
How often do you engage a new builder, a new contractor?
Honestly, we probably only had 2 or 3 new customers all of last year.
Okay.
Everything else has just been repeat work.
Yep, that's great, because obviously you get into a rhythm with a builder, and that makes your job easier, makes his job easier, their job easier. What do you find is being one of the biggest hurdles to get over, though, with that new company, the contractor that you've got an owner that just says, yeah, absolutely, we're going to go concrete on this project?
We've really streamlined that process. So we have a wall detail sheet that I've developed with a couple local engineers in town. I post it on my website for them to download, to pass on. They can add it to their permit package. And we've tried to make it a direct replacement as much as possible. There's a couple little small minor changes on the plumbing that's in the wall, exterior walls. But other than that, we've incorporated a hybrid system using Helix steel. And so using the hybrid system, we're leaving the same dowels that are coming out for what would have been a downpour in block when we're transitioning over block structures. And so we're able to leave all that the same, and then we have those same verticals as well as the addition of Helix steel. And so that makes the transition pretty easy just by adding that one sheet. When we're transitioning the wood structures, there's a little bit more involvement with the engineer, because typically we're changing footer sizes to add for the added weight of the concrete wall. But it's not as big of a change as most people would think, because we're still leaving the wall height, plate heights are all going to be the same. We're still going to have truss straps and stuff coming out of the top of the wall to attach, or J-bolts, whatever your roofing system is. So it's not as difficult as what most people think when they originally start.
And really you're not seeing the resistance or the concern for things as benign as attaching cabinetry, finishing door bucks, and a lot of the things that traditional builders may use as a resistant point to say, I'm not comfortable with that, so let's mark it up.
So typically, even if they're building a lot with wood, they've at least done some with concrete block.
Okay.
And so the finish on the inside and the bucking around doors and stuff like that is very similar. We do change how we do the windows from what's typical, because typically there's just a precast block, concrete buck or sill at the bottom of a window. And we actually have a hot wire foam machine that cuts all of our window openings for every home, and so we actually do all the bucking out of concrete on all 4 sides. So we try to eliminate as much wood as we can out of the structure, and so by doing that, it's a slightly different window attachment. Typically they're doing caulk, shims in the window, and then it's directly Tapconned in. So they're eliminating the wood buck that you would have with a block or a frame construction. But you still do a buck around your doors, and then as far as the attachments on the inside, it's typically a foam board, furring strips, and drywall, just like what you would have with block. So there's no real change on the inside.
Yeah, so keep it as comfortable as possible for what technology they do. Now, I surmise if you went to Ohio, it'd be a little bit different learning curve for those builders.
Oh, for sure. But if you try to change too much at once, you just get so much resistance, you never really gain any traction.
Right. Well, you mentioned Helix, and Helix is a new technology that I'm very familiar with, and being here in the association and the recipient of a lot of new technology. And we're here at the World of Concrete. You take a specific week out of your career to come here and to be part of this environment. What do you look forward to the most when you get the opportunity to be in something like World of Concrete?
I've enjoyed taking a lot of classes over the years and just trying to get viewpoints from other contractors and see if there's anything we can pick up to change and make ourselves either more profitable, more efficient, or bring a new technology to our market that's not currently there. We were able to do that with Helix. It's been almost 12 years now since we incorporated Helix. We tried a bunch of different fibers and metals and different things to try to achieve what we've been able to do with Helix, which we eliminate about 85% of our shrinkage and temperature cracking that would normally occur in a concrete wall. This idea of bringing stuff like that back to our market is exciting, and it's always good to meet up with the current suppliers and builders and then other people in the industry, and we talk about every challenge that everyone's facing, whether that be labor or different equipment solutions they've come up with, or better concrete pumping ideas, just everything that goes along with it.
Right. You've grown up in the concrete industry. We've already established that you were in and around your dad and your uncle's businesses for a long time before you stepped it into yourself. Do you have relationships that you made way back when as a kid in concrete that you have been able to maintain today?
Some of the form suppliers and different guys that worked at some of the supply companies and stuff that have they've known me longer than I remember knowing them. And a lot of those guys now are aging out and are retiring and stuff. And it's always good to see the ones that are still around. I go around and make sure I hit all their booths and check and see how they're doing and how their health's holding up at this point and what everybody's up to. So it's just it's a family when you've been around this many people for so long. You feel like, I had some of the suppliers that I've known that long. They came to my wedding back when I got married 15 years ago. And so they're really like family.
Yeah, it really is. It's an industry that if you allow it to be a family, you find how quickly and easily it comes. And so that's fantastic that you've been able to maintain that. So now as a prominent, you'd have to consider yourself a prominent component of the building industry in Florida for housing, for a wealth of concrete structures. And yet you're in an environment with as much technological innovation as you see here. What are you looking for the most to expose yourself to?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I consider myself an expert. It's just, I wish there were more people in Florida doing what I do. There's definitely the demand for it. And I feel like if people would start up in other parts of the state, I feel like they would be covered up with work at this point.
What do you think holds it back the most?
There's a rather high barrier to entry to this industry. It's a pretty significant investment in forms and equipment to just get rolling. But with the amount of work that's out there right now and the demand that is starting to be there for concrete housing, I feel like it would be a worthy investment for a lot of larger companies or companies that are in other parts of the country that might be in a market that's struggling or being held back due to, I know the Chicago market, that kind of those states where they have really high taxes and really high regulations and stuff that's really a detriment to the building industry there. Contractors that have the experience and stuff, I really feel like they could relocate to areas where there's a demand for this, whether it be Texas, Florida, South Carolina, areas with either high incidence of pests or termite, rot kind of things that concrete's a solution for, or natural weather events, so natural disasters and things like that concrete is so resistant to.
So you moved from a foundation contract, that's been your past experience, kind of how you built yourself, a passion with concrete. Was it a big transition to go from below grade to above grade?
It wasn't, and I'm always asked that of how did you think to do that, or it looks so different. But the overall process is really the same. You go from having a basement with 3 drop-in windows to a home with maybe 30, a bunch of man doors, and have back porches with porch beams and columns and elevated decks that are cast in place. But the overall process is the same. I'd be happy to talk with anyone that had the interest in trying to move and get into the market and kind of give them some tips and ideas and ways to price things that they're not used to. I've had a lot of practice at this point, and it's not as difficult as what people think.
And it can seem overwhelming, and so that's great. And I know you to be the personality that has begun to offer yourself and involve yourself in that future, broadening the industry and challenging the industry. And one of those things facing us right now, I think the most, and maybe this is a barrier to entry to some contractors, is the issue of labor. And we fight it in every aspect of construction, and particularly in concrete construction. What are you finding as being your success point in Florida to keep the steady workforce and to meet your growing demand?
I face the same challenges that everybody does, and I could use more labor all the time just like everyone else. I've been very fortunate, try to really take care of my guys. I have some employees now at 14 and 15 years that have been with me that long, that started as laborers and now foremen and lead guys. But there's just not any more labor. So between political environment changes and how they've allowed people in and out of this country, and just how everybody is wanting to go to college even though they don't know what they're going to do, and then leaving with all these student loans. I think there's a lot of people that should be entering the trades and starting trade schools and getting into the concrete or construction industry in general that haven't to this point. You've seen almost an entire generation that's skipped it. Everything's based around the internet, and now everybody's starting to age out. I don't know what they're going to do to replace all these people that are now aging out to the point where they're retiring and there's nobody behind them to really take over the reins. Right. So I feel like now at this point there's such a huge opportunity for anybody that did show some initiative and drive and some intelligence for doing any of those type of trades or running companies or whatever. There's just a huge opportunity for them, way more so than if they were to enter just the regular working for a large corporation or get into one of these other type of things like that. I don't think people have really started to see that opportunity yet, but I really see it just talking with all the people that are around and talking to people that have been in the industry a long time. They don't have anyone to take over their companies.
So you've got to definitely have a business degree background. It's just playing devil's advocate. Would you go back and do that over? Do you feel like you could be where you're at today if you hadn't had at least that little? Not little, there's nothing certainly little about any college degree, but if you committed yourself to that and then you went in another direction, So now you've got a young man that wants to come and is hearing you, is believing that there's a positive future, but wants to see ownership. How do you bring that new individual into the business in such a way that you can encourage that growth?
As far as being a manager in a corporation for a company that is somebody's wanting somebody to pass it down to, I think you pretty much have to have the hands-on experience. And so it's almost like a journeyman type mentality, or you're bringing them in and they have to get so many years and learn all the different parts of the field. That's the problem we have with some of the labor that we hire. On the day 2, they want to become a foreman. It's just not the way it works. And so I think if somebody were to show initiative and really work for some of these companies, there's such a demand that they would get taken under the wing of some of these older owners of corporations, and they could really guide them and move up really quickly. I do see an advantage to having, I got a business management and finance degree, which the finance was because I wanted to get into financial aspects that I didn't do or didn't continue doing. But I feel like the business management has been helpful to some degree, but I don't think it's required.
Right. So you're going to have a chance to be mentored, if you would, as well as, I suppose, the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, you figure it out, right? And failure is one of the biggest predictors of success. And so I suppose that some of that's going to come from there.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the things I do best is because I first failed at them. And I think that's true for everybody that's been a successful business owner.
Absolutely. So again, I'm going to ask a labor question. You've got the ability to attract new workers into your business, people wanting to earn a living, maybe even listening to this podcast and saying, yeah, that's a guy I want to go work for. What do you find often the most difficult thing to step forward in the onboarding of new employees? What's holding them back the most?
If they've never done a construction job, it's just the idea of doing a hard day's work, where you got to work your way up to become a laborer to start, and before you can start becoming more of a supervisory type role. I think it's really important, especially in this industry, to learn how everything works. You can't really be a supervisor and know how things work if you've never actually done the work.
Right.
And I think that's true in most trades. So the most business owners that are very successful have learned how to they don't just start a company and not have any experience in that trade and know how to do all the ins and outs. You don't become a very good leader if you can't know how to do and instruct people how to do every part of that project or industry or job.
Are you finding aspects of your business that you're still learning every day?
I'd like to say so, I guess.
Still failing.
Yeah, so there's definitely things, how to handle certain situations, how to deal with different customers, and how to constantly, the market's changing. Right now, it's really good. There's long lead times and everybody's really booked out. And so dealing with the challenges of scheduling that and dealing with the fact that other trades are so busy that they don't hit their target dates, all that kind of stuff either. So there's a lot of different scheduling things that I think you're always learning, and how to deal with customers, I think, is just a thing you continue to grow in how you're going to handle customers and treat people.
Yeah. Outside of labor, then, is there anything particular about the concrete industry that you think is either going to be a barrier or a hurdle for future success?
I really don't. I just think it's going to be something that is going to continue to get in higher demand. I just don't see any reason why people wouldn't want a higher quality structure going forward. I think that as you start transitioning people out of wood frame and maybe even some concrete block, I think a lot of the trade industry, the business owners and the laborers and stuff of those can transition over and to offer the better product.
Right. Well, I think that's fantastic, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate the chance to get to know you in an expanded way, and we've recreated an opportunity to work together. Concrete housing is really, it's going to take everybody's role to participate in it. And so some of the listeners to this podcast, they might be contractors that are currently very successful basement contractors, and I think you've given them a good message that you've got to realize that you can do it. You can be a challenge, meet the challenge head up. And maybe there's a chance that builders that are on here listening, they really can identify with the fact that it's being done. It's not a new technology anymore, is it?
No, it's not. It's been around for a long time, and I think it's just slowly becoming more and more accepted in different markets, and what homeowners are starting to realize they want. See it, touch it, feel it is what we normally tell our builders and stuff. If we get a home in one of their neighborhoods that's under construction, once our walls are up and the rest of the house is being built, if other prospective homeowners are walking through that and they actually see it, touch it, feel it, and can compare the difference between either wood frame or block, the product at that point sells itself. And that's why I haven't had to market and do cold calls and stuff in so long, because we continue to put product out there that honestly the biggest and best advertising thing I've done since we've been in business is I put our logo on the outside of every structure after we're complete, and it has our website on it, and it draws a lot of interest. And a lot of people, I get a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails just from doing that. And that's really the only advertising we do.
Wow, that's fantastic. And do you have one last question for you? It's considering that you do that, and so you've established brand recognition in the communities in which you work. Do you see your employees responding to that and having that kind of welling sense of pride that they've been involved in some of those structures that are being highly regarded?
Oh, absolutely. You can see it on their Instagram posts and all that stuff. They're really proud of that. We complete a really impressive looking or really difficult projects. I get a lot of feedback from that. And it's always fun to see when you open a set of plans and it doesn't say poured concrete wall detail, it says TCB walls detail. I like to joke around that we're becoming like the Kleenex of tissue paper kind of thing, only we're poured concrete walls. And so it is kind of neat to see.
One of these days, that will not be called concrete shell construction, concrete housing. It will be called TCB housing. Right?
That would be fun.
Working on a new brand. That's right. I like that. I like the Kleenex analogy. Well, thank you again for your time. I know you've got a busy schedule here. I've watched you engage with a lot of the members in the CFA booth, and so I'm glad that you've been able to engage in that networking opportunity this year, and I hope it continues to be beneficial for you as it is. I know it is every time you get a chance to talk with your peers.
It will be, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, Tim Ball, TCB Walls Incorporated, Melbourne, Florida. You can check out his website and take a look at some of the great photos of the work that they're doing. Don't hesitate to reach out to him, as he's already said that he'd be willing to talk you through the transition and to help you find your way into concrete housing. It is our future. We just have to embrace it. Tim, thanks very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks a lot.
Behind the Mic is brought to you by the Concrete Foundations Association. You can learn more about us and about becoming one of our #CFA Concrete Pros by visiting our website, cfaconcretepros.org. If you're a concrete professional interested in being part of a future podcast, reach out to us by email to info@cfaconcretepros.org to start a conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Mic.